Hi, I'm Francesca and welcome to another Rialto channel podcast. This morning I'm delighted to be joined by the Indian filmmaker Vaishali Sinha to talk about her documentary, Ask the SEXPERT. Welcome. Thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So this film is about a remarkable gentleman, Dr. Watsa, who is a highly popular 93-year-old sex advice columnist for a daily newspaper in Mumbai. But this film is about so much more than that. So you give us a little bit of an idea about what the audience can expect.
Sure. I think you set it up well. It's Ask the SEXPERT is a feature-length documentary about Dr. Mahendra Vatsa, who's sort of this wildly iconic and popular sex advice columnist in Mumbai and several other cities in India. He has a daily column in a newspaper that which addresses about 4 to 6 questions every day about sex and sexuality, and they range from the basic to fetishes and a range of questions, and Dr. Vatsa sort of handles it all with great aplomb and wit, while also giving very sort of, non-judgmental, non-moralistic advice. And all of this endears him to his millions of readers, and over a period of 10 to 15 years, he's become a cult figure in India. So the film sort of intimately follows and brings to life this much-loved person behind the column. But the film is also set against the backdrop of a lack of sex education in schools in India. In fact, it's banned in several schools. So Dr. Vatsa is sort of like, perhaps despite that or because of it, has become very needed and popular.
So where did this idea come from? Did it come to mind when you were making your previous documentary, Made in India, the film about international surrogacy?
I hadn't exactly thought of it at the time, but each film is just so immersive and demands so much of our sort of attention. And I think as filmmakers, we really, it's like putting a puzzle together, and it's so fun, and we get absorbed and consumed by that subject at hand. But I've pretty much all my life, while in India and now in the U.S., have worked on issues of sexual health. And this just around a year or two after finishing Made in India, as I was, figuring out the next film, this just seemed like, after years of working on this subject, it felt like I wanted to go back to the basics and talk about education and really look at, where can we arrest some of these problems. But I also wanted to do it in an organic way, and I know that India can be a great place to have this conversation, because some of these problems can be so sort of like accentuated and there, but really it exists. The lack of sex ed and problems thereof exist everywhere, including in the U.S. But yeah, I knew it would be a fun project to make a film about sex, and then whatever conversations come out of it would be enlightening. So I did not want to necessarily make an educational film as such. It would be educational nonetheless, but I wanted to make a film that I could have fun with.
Because you're right, Dr. Watsa is such an engaging character. He is so charming, and he's impossible not to like, because, as you say, he is so non-judgmental and non-moralistic with the way he deals with these questions. So he's just such a likable character, and such a brilliant way to such the perfect person to have at the centre of this wider discussion of sex education. When you went to him and approached him about being part of the movie, how did he feel about that?
Yeah, so I was sort of really sitting here in Brooklyn, wanting to go back home to India, to where my first home, where I love shooting. I was kind of drawing up an idea for a film, and I thought, why don't I make a film about a sex therapist and his clients, and sort of look at male sexuality as like the framework. And long story short, I found out Dr. Vatsa very quickly into my research, and then how delightful it was to then discover his popularity and also meet him in his home office, where I found out for the first time that he was 89 years old at the time. And I had no idea. My jaw dropped when he opened the door. No one had written about him. And I thought, much like some of the young women in my film that I interview on the street, that, must be sort of like someone, a young, middle-aged chap or a young man really, who kind of has a lot of energy to do this daily column and then also be cool enough to talk about sex. Really, all of my own stereotypes were shattered. And then, so it was really fun. And I showed him, he was very receptive, and he does this with everyone. He greatly believes in having conversations with anyone who's interested in talking about this, whether they're closed-minded or open-minded. He thinks a conversation is important. And so I was much like many other people who come through the door to talk to him. I showed him my previous film. He really liked it. I talked about my intentions with the film, and he was on board. I don't think he realized I would hang around for 4 years. That's the difference.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because he started India's first official sex education for adolescents in the 70s. He's been talking about this for such a long period of time. And yet what I really liked in this film was when there is a moment where I think he's talking to another sex education worker, and he actually says, are we doing the right thing educating these young adults without their parents? Like, he's still, even at his age, discussing the best way to do this.
I love that about him. I think that, and I think he knows the answers, but I think some of it, but he's also, I think what keeps him young is his willingness to sort of be open to questions and new ideas every day, and to just go with the flow. But with regards to that question, are we doing the right thing by giving sex education to the young people, minusing the adults, is what he says. And I think what he really means is that, and he said this before, is because of the cultural differences and generational gap and difference in India currently, children tend to end up having conflicts with an older generation because of their sort of progressive views, and so Dr. Vatsa is really thinking that parents need to be involved in the conversation as well.
And you also capture the more conservative and traditional approach to sex education as well. And the one thing that you take out of this film is how passionately people feel about the subject.
How passionately that he feels, or
yes, and also with is it Dr. Pratibha? Yes, she's very passionate about her more conservative and traditional approach as well. There's obviously an awful lot of just emotion around the question of sex education in India.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and I think that's kind of mirrors in a way where conversations are in India right now. There are a lot of conversations happening, and but what I do find really interesting to me as a filmmaker, I'm really interested in people who are sort of doing something, which kind of allows us to see what transpires by way of human emotions and decision makings, and that reveals struggles in a very real way. And so Dr. Vatsa, as opposed to Pratibha, really gave me an opportunity and a window to sort of look into a myriad of sort of people's problems, day-to-day struggles and questions, which then when you do that and you go deeper and deeper into that, your questions evolve, and then you kind of go past the polarization of the conversation, and now you're more into gray areas. And for example, I think Aditi Mittal, one of the stand-up comedians in this film, who also is a fan of Dr. Vatsa's, says this, and it's not included in the film, but she says, well, the whole country's talking about whether having sex at a young age is good or bad, whereas people are writing to Dr. Vatsa asking, is it okay if my penis bends to the left? Like, it's sort of like...
I love the comment that you included from her where she's going, I don't understand why we're not talking about sex. Look at that. I mean, look how many of us there are. There's billions of us. We're having sex, so why aren't we talking about it? Which I just thought was a lovely comment.
Such real questions that don't even figure in people's mind when they're just talking about whether sex is good or bad. So anyway, she really is delightful. And
so what has the reaction been to the film in India?
It's actually it's much loved by people, and it's available on Netflix India. The film had a very successful festival opening in 2017 at the Mumbai Film Festival. Dr. Vatsa came to all 3 or 4 screenings, and we got one of the longest standing ovations for documentary films at the festival, because India is a land of like Bollywood films, mainstream films, and documentaries tend to get sort of sidetracked a little bit. But in any case, I mean, we're in a resurgence for docs. But the film was much loved, and has been traveling a lot through other festivals, but is also, and then won a Critics' Choice Award for Best Documentary in Mumbai this year. And the film is on Netflix India, so it's accessible for a lot of people. I think it's been doing quite well there.
And, as you mentioned, the film has been screening all over the world. Have you found that other countries have the same issue with the battle over sex education?
I do believe so, and I think there's a reason why a lot of people connect, because they, at a very base level, they understand many of the struggles and issues in the film. The film, I'm just in conversation with festival organizers in Romania, in Russia, in many other countries where the film has been a huge success, and those programmers are coming back to me to program the film for more festivals in their countries. And I believe they're programming it under themes like freedom of thought, and I think it's an interesting and fun way to actually explore many other freedom-related questions.
You mentioned that there's been a bit of a resurgence in documentaries in India, and you also mentioned you're now living in New York. But is there a strong female filmmaking community in India at the moment?
Is there a strong
female? Is there a lot of a strong female filmmaking industry?
Oh, absolutely. I think there's, especially in the doc world, in the documentary world, there, as is even in the U.S., there's a strong female filmmaker community. It's quite robust. There have been festivals that have been around for several years and are now kind of, are seeing more and more submissions from filmmakers because of the accessibility of filmmaking and cameras and editing software, and people are, it's become much easier for women. When I was in my 20s, when I left India, it was really wonderful for me to come to New York and like waitress or hostess at restaurants and make my first film, because I could do that and give myself the time to sort of dedicate myself as an artist to a film. I couldn't have imagined doing that in India because it just would not be acceptable for women
Right.
to do those jobs, and but I think more and more so the scenario has really changed in the last 10 years, so that's there. With the fiction world, there are some pretty good, strong names, but I think much more needs to be done.
Mm. And will you continue to make Indian stories? Will you continue to travel back to India?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that, and I would continue to do that. But I'm also, I also make sort of international stories, so I kind of divide my time between the U.S. and in India, and I'm happy to say I'm fortunate to be able to do that so far. But let's see.
Excellent. Oh, well, look, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. The film is called Ask the SEXPERT. It is absolutely charming. I highly recommend you catch it on Rialto channel on Thursday, the 27th of September. Thank you so much, Vaishali.
Thank you. Thank you, Francesca. Take care.
Bye-bye.